我们现在开始今天晚上的讲座。
So I'd like to begin now with our talk for this evening.
麻省理工我第一次来。
This is my first time to visit MIT.
所以就是今天见到了很多的学生，以及我们的其他的学佛的人，感到非常的高兴。
So to see in my midst so many students and students of Buddhism, I feel very happy.
那我想我们就趁这个机会，今天给大家分享一些我学佛的一些心得。
So I'd like to take this opportunity to share with everybody some perspectives on studying Buddhism.
但是我们今天这里是一个学校所以呢，我讲的不是传法。
However, because tonight the venue we are in is a university, so my talk tonight isn't a Dharma teaching as such.
就是把一些佛教的东西，我们可以用来比如说就在工作、生活当中可以把它应用。
What I will be teaching on instead are some Buddhist teachings or methods that can be used, implemented in our everyday lives, our working lives or everyday lives.
但是这个不等于我们大家要去学佛或者是信佛。
However, making use of these methods doesn't necessarily mean that we have to believe in Buddhism or study Buddhism.
比如说我们不学佛不信佛，在这样子的情况下，也可以把一些佛教的东西可以用来让我们的心身更加的健康。
It is possible for us, without necessarily studying Buddhism or believing in Buddhism, to take contents from the Buddhist tradition and use them to help ourselves to live more healthily.
比如说现在在西方非常流行的这个正念禅。
An example of this would be mindfulness meditation, which is very popular in the West these days.
正念禅就是来自于佛教。
Mindfulness meditation derives from Buddhism.
但是现在我们西方学这个正念禅的都不一定是佛教徒。
However, this doesn't mean that everyone who practices mindfulness meditation these days is necessarily a Buddhist.
但是我们不学佛的、不信佛的人，用正念禅可以帮助自己的心理健康。
However, it's possible for people who are not students of Buddhism or believers in Buddhism to take this method or approach of mindfulness meditation to help them have more healthy minds.
这个就已经证明了什么呢？我们可以把一些佛教里面的东西可以拿来用除了这个佛教徒以外的人也可以得到帮助。
So this is clearly proven that it's possible to take aspects or contents from Buddhism and use them such that even non-Buddhists can gain use or benefit from these approaches.
那么我们今天的这个题目就是在21世纪我们的人生怎么样才能够有意义。
So the topic of my talk tonight is how to lead a meaningful life in the 21st century.
21世纪就是在人类历史上就是一个跟以前是一个完全不一样的一个时代。
In terms of human history, the 21st century is a period that is very different from periods that have gone before.
生活在这个时代里面的人，我们享受了很多的这个高科技给我们带来的方便。
Humans who live during this period are able to enjoy the many conveniences that advanced science and technology bring us.
同时我们也就面临了很多非常难以解决的问题。
However, at the same time, we also encounter many problems that are difficult to solve.
首先就有2个方面。
To begin with, there are 2 aspects to this.
有2个人为的失去平衡的一个这样子的事情。
Or rather, there are 2 aspects in which man-made aspects or human-made aspects in which we have lost balance.
第一个是我们的精神生活和物质生活的发展失去了平衡。
The first of these aspects is in terms of the development of our material lives and our spiritual lives. In this respect, we have lost balance.
然后第二就是人与大自然的这个相处就发生了这个失去平衡。
And the other respect in which we have fallen out of balance is in terms of the relationship between humans and the natural environment.
那么这2个失去平衡让我们的生活还有就是我们的大的环境受到了很大的影响。
Insofar as we have lost balance in terms of these 2 things, our lives and our broader environment have been impacted significantly.
首先第一个，我们的这个物质生活和精神生活失去了平衡以后的结果是什么？
So first of all, we need to take a look at what the results have been of our material and spiritual lives, or the development of these lives falling out of a relationship of balance.
我们比如说在个人的这个生活当中比如说我们的物质是空前的发达但是呢，因为我们的精神的这个发展跟不上所以这个物质没有像我们想象的那么给我们带来幸福。
Currently, we have a situation where in our personal lives, our state of material development or level of material development is very high. However, due to the fact that our spiritual development has not reached a corresponding level, therefore, the material things in our life are unable to deliver the happiness that we might seek.
物质它本身它不是善也不是恶。
Material things are not inherently good or bad.
它也不是幸福，也不是痛苦。
Neither are they inherently happy or bringing of happiness or suffering.
但是物质我们可以用到善的方面，也可以用到恶的方面。
However, it is possible to use material things for both positive and negative purposes.
物质可以给我们带来幸福，也可以给我们带来痛苦。
Material things can bring us both happiness as well as unhappiness.
有一个非常重要的问题呢，就是物质它不能告诉我们它应该用到什么地方。
One really critical issue is that material things themselves are not able to tell us how we should use them.
最后这个物质财富用到哪个方面，以我们的心来决定。
Ultimately, the purpose that we use material things to achieve is determined by our own minds.
如果我们的心不善，那么物质会给我们带来很多负面的东西。
If our minds are not positive and virtuous, then material things will bring many negative impacts.
然后，如果我们的心善那么物质就可以给我们带来可以给我们创造更多的幸福快乐。
However, if our minds are positive and virtuous, then material things can create for us even more happiness and positivity.
所以最后物质能不能给我们带来幸福，以我们的心来决定。
So ultimately, whether or not material things are able to bring us happiness really relies on our mind, is determined by our minds.
然后这个21世纪科技非常的发达，但是呢，有一个非常重要的问题呢，科技这个技术它不能告诉我们它应该用到什么方面，哪方面。
So even though in the 21st century science and technology is extremely developed, nevertheless it remains the case that technology itself isn't able to instruct us as to how it should be used.
科技最后用到哪方面，还是以我们的心来决定。
Ultimately, how technology is used is something that is determined by us, by our own minds.
它可以造福人类，也可以毁灭人类。
This technology is able to bring happiness to humanity. At the same time, it also has the potential to destroy humanity.
那么这样子以后，我们的这个物质的发展和精神的发展失去了平衡了以后呢，物质给我们带来的很多的都是负面的。
So when we have a situation where the material and spiritual aspects of our life lose or fail to have a relationship of balance, then the material aspect generates a lot of negativity in our lives.
那物质我们这个时代就是人类历史上这个我们这个时代就是物质应该是最丰富的时代。
From the perspective of human history, the current period is probably the period in which the material realm is most developed, is most elaborated.
但是有数据显示人类就是自从有了这个幸福指数以后很多地方的这个幸福指数一直都在越来越低。
However, data shows that since we've had a happiness index for measuring happiness, that people's levels of happiness are constantly declining.
然后我们很多对未来有各种各样的焦虑。
And many people feel all kinds of anxieties about the future.
有各种各样的恐惧。
And have all different kinds of fears.
这些恐惧和焦虑不但是让我们感觉不到幸福，而且它可以剥夺我们的性命。
Not only do these fears can these fears and anxieties make us not feel happy, they also disturb or disrupt our mind.
比如说这些焦虑这些恐惧再上升就可以变成抑郁症。
For example, fear and anxiety, if they increase, have the potential to become depression.
今天我们不管是有信仰的没有信仰的或者是信仰佛教的或者信仰其他宗教的那么这个所有的信仰都不是先天的，这些都是后天的。
So today, whether we are talking of people who have religious faith or no religious faith, or faith in Buddhism or faith in some other kind of religious tradition, actually any kind of religious faith is not something that is intrinsic to us as humans. It is something that is invented post the existence of humanity.
那么我们就应该大家思考一下，我们虽然拥有这么多的物质但是为什么感觉不到幸福？
So everybody should really give some thought to this question. How is it that we have that we're so rich in material aspects and yet don't have happiness?
然后第二我们刚刚讲也有第二个这个失去平衡，就是人类与大自然的相处失去了平衡。
And so the second respect in which we have fallen out of balance, as just mentioned, is the relationship between humans and the natural environment.
这就导致了很多的环境的问题。
And this has resulted in many different kinds of environmental problems.
那么比如说 像这个气候的变化，
For example, global warming.
很多物种的灭绝，
And many extinctions, the extinction of many species.
然后在这样子的这个原因的主要的原因，也就是这个人与自然的这个相处的平衡失去。
And various manifestations such as these are all due to the fundamental issue of the relationship between humans and the environment falling out of balance.
那么在这样子的一个时代我们的生活在一个这样子的时代的人，怎么样把我们的生命变得更加的有意义？
So how should we, as people living in this age, living in this period, lead lives that are of meaning?
佛教里面完全是有一些方法是可以用的。
Within the Buddhist teachings, within the Buddhist tradition, there are many things that we can use to make our lives meaningful.
首先第一个我们很多人平时都不喜欢别人也不喜欢自己。
To begin with, many people don't like other people, and they also don't like themselves.
也就是说，很多人不爱自己。
That is to say, they don't have love for themselves.
也就是说，我们很多人就是比较讨厌自己。
Or rather, that they even hate themselves.
那么这个讨厌它最终也就变成一种疾病，心理的疾病。
And this self-loathing ultimately results in a kind of mental illness.
那么这个就叫做自卑症。
This is referred to as an inferiority complex.
然后呢，我们很多人也不爱其他人。
And there's a lot of people that don't feel love for other humans.
在这样子的情况下我们不懂得爱自己，不懂得爱别人，这样子的时候呢，我们每一个人都感觉自己很孤独。
So when people are in a situation where they don't have love for themselves and they don't have love for others, then they typically feel very lonely.
然后我们感觉不到自己的身边有几个真正的朋友。
And often feel that there is no one in their midst who are real friends.
我们必须要知道一个问题。
So it's important here that we realize a basic issue.
朋友是什么呀？朋友就是像我们的手机的充电宝。
What is a friend, or what are friends? Well, friends are like battery chargers to our mobile phones.
当我们自己没有电的时候一定要靠朋友。
So when we find ourselves in a situation with no power, it's necessary that we rely on our friends.
简单的说，比如说我们今天特别的不开心父母也解决不了然后其他人也解决不了的时候呢，然后我们的一个最简单的解决方法是必须要有一个知心的朋友，把自己的所有东西不保留的可以去讲。
So putting it simply, if we feel unhappy about something, it's an issue that our parents aren't able to resolve, the most simple means of addressing this is to talk to a friend, a really good friend, and and tell them all about one's problems.
通过这种跟朋友的这种沟通通过这种朋友的沟通，然后我们的很多心理的压力心理的一些焦虑是可以消除的。
It's possible through this kind of communication with friends for us to let go of a lot of our pressure and anxiety.
然后，如果我们有一个很好的朋友那么平时我们面对一些问题的时候，心里很踏实。
If we have a good friend too, when we find ourselves confronting different kinds of problems, we feel we have more conviction, we feel more stable.
比如说我们是自己一个人的时候我们背着背包然后呢爬山，然后呢我们看到前面有一座山然后让我们去测这个山有多高这样子的时候，当我们没有朋友的时候，我们去预测的时候这个预测往往会高于这个山的本身的高度。
So if we were to be carrying a heavy backpack and staring at a mountain in front of us, in a situation where we had no friend in our company, then it is always the case that we will estimate the height of the mountain to be higher than what it actually is.
然后如果我们有5个、10个朋友背着同样重量的这个背包然后呢看前面的同样的一座山然后让我们去预测这个山的高度害怕这个时候呢往往我们测出来的是比这个实际的高度要低。
However, if we have in our midst 5 or 10 friends who are carrying backpacks that are as heavy as our own, then it is always the case when we estimate the height of the mountain that we will estimate it to be lower, less high than it actually is.
这是实际上这个不是一个比喻实际上就是一个真实的情况。
So this isn't a metaphor. Actually, this is the truth. This is how it is.
现在我们把这个当做一个比喻来描述一些我们的生活当中的事情。
However, for the time being, let's use it as a metaphor in order to be able to speak to a few things about our lives.
前面的这座山是我们的生活当中的各种各样的坎坷。
We can say that the mountain in front of us is a metaphor for the various difficulties and hardships that we experience in our lives.
然后我们现在去预测这个山的高度这是我们对未来的各种各样的焦虑。
And we can our act of estimating the height of the mountain, we can liken this to the various anxieties that we feel about the future.
然后这个爬山的这个其他的朋友是我们的生活当中的知心的朋友。
And we can liken our fellow mountain climbers to our friends, our good friends in our lives.
好，这样子，这个就是说明什么呢？如果我们有几个很好的朋友、知心的朋友大家一起去面对这个生活当中的任何的坎坷的时候因为我们有朋友大家可以一起去面对，所以呢，我们对未来的这个担忧往往比它的实际的要低得多我们不会把它放大太多的焦虑。
So what we can say or see from this is that if we have a few really good friends, and then when we find ourselves confronting difficulty, we will always estimate the difficulty of the future to be less than what it actually is. That is, we won't amplify it, we won't exaggerate it.
心里总是有安全感。
And our minds will always feel secure.
所以我们遇到工作上的、生活上的任何的坎坷的时候，就很顺利的可以度过。
And so when we encounter hardship, say, in our everyday lives or in our work lives, we'll be able to smoothly navigate these problems.
然后如果我们在生活当中没有这样子的朋友那么我们对未来或者是我们对未来就是有可能发生的某些事情一定把它放大化。
However, if we don't have such friends as this, then it is necessarily the case that we will magnify or blow out of proportion eventualities that might take place in the future.
然后就很焦虑失眠，然后就是最后是抑郁症然后我们的生活、学习各方面都受到很严重的影响。
And to the extent that we might give rise to anxiety, loss of sleep, ultimately depression, and then aspects of our lives, including our study lives, will be impacted on.
好，那么我们刚才讲了人就是需要一个很好的朋友。那么朋友来自于什么？很多人说我们怎么样拥有很好的朋友。
So we just mentioned now the importance of having friends. Well, where do friends come from?
然后朋友不是因为我们一起吃喝玩乐，就是相互之间的一种信任这个信任才能够这个在这个基础上才能够找到更好的、知心的、可靠的把自己的所有东西没有任何保留的可以讲的这样子的朋友。
So friends such as this, they are not people that we come to, or friends that we come to have just through the fact of, going out to people that we interact with in our leisure lives. Rather, friends or friendship is built on a foundation of trust, and it's only after we can establish this foundation of trust that we will have friends who are firm and reliable, and to whom we can unreservedly share our problems.
但是这种人与人之间的这种信任在全世界、全球范围当中就是在越来越下滑。
However, trust between humans on a global level is becoming increasingly decreasing.
这个不是某一个人的揣测这个是有数据的。
And this is not just an estimate or a projection of any one individual. This is a phenomenon that is documented.
所以这些问题都是我们生活当中实实在在面临的问题。
So these problems are ones that we encounter in our lives in fact, in actuality.
我们有信仰的、没有信仰的，什么样的人都会遇到这样子的情况。
Regardless of whether we have religious belief or not, these problems are ones that everyone encounters.
那么现在我们需要的是什么？我们人首先我们要去思考，不管是什么样的人白种人、黄种人然后就是其他的人种，或者是有信仰的、没有信仰，什么样的人都是一样我们人是什么东西什么物质构成的
？So what we really need now, or as to what we really need now, everyone needs to give some thought as to what fundamentally humans are. What are humans comprised of, regardless of whether they are white or Asian, whether they're religious or non-religious? Ultimately, what does it mean to be human?
好，这个时候我们会发现人是以物质和精神这两个东西构成的。
And through thinking about this question, we will arrive at the discovery that humans are a composite of a physical self and a spiritual self.
所以我们就是有两种不同的生活，因为人是物质和精神不同的物质构成，所以各有各的需求，所以就成为两种生活，一个叫做物质生活，另外一个叫做精神生活。
So because humans are a composite of a physical and of the physical or material and spiritual, there are two life realms that relate to these two aspects. And because these aspects of our human selves are different kinds of matter, there are different kinds of needs that pertain to these different two aspects of our human selves.
那么构成我们人的这个两个不同的物质，它们有不同的需求。身体物质它有它的需求， 然后我们的精神有精神的需求，两个需求是不一样的。
So these two aspects or elements that comprise us have their different needs. That is to say, we have physical needs, we also have psychological or spiritual needs.
我们很多人认为物质的方面，这个生活满足了以后，这个需求满足了以后，我们认为所有问题解决了。
There are many people who think that once we have fulfilled or satisfied our material needs, that all of our needs have been answered.
但是这个是一个不太成熟的，或者是不太了解我们自己的一种想法。
However, this view is relatively immature, or rather we could say it's a view that is based on not having a very good understanding of what we in fact are.
所以我们肉体它有它的需求，然后它的需求满足了以后，这个并不代表我们的精神的需求也就满足了。
So for this reason, the satisfaction of the needs of our physical body doesn't then necessarily mean that our spiritual needs are thereby answered too.
那么我们物质空前的发达但是呢感觉不到这个幸福主要的原因就是因为我们的精神生活当中还有些东西就是缺乏的。
If we have a very immense level of material development but do not enjoy accompanying happiness, then the reason for this is because our spiritual needs are presently lacking in several respects.
那么我们今天要讲的，比如说一个人的生命变得有意义，首先我们认为什么是有意义？首先是自己感觉到过上一个幸福的人生，同时我们能够让其他人也能够过上一个幸福的这个生活这个就是我们的这个今天我们讲的这个有意义生命的有意义。
So tonight we are speaking to this topic of how to go about leading a life that is meaningful, and in order to do this, essentially we need two things. We need to be able to make ourselves happy, have ourselves lead lives that are happy. At the same time, too, we need to be able to help others lead lives that are happy too.
好，那么我们自己要过上一个有意义或者是幸福的人生，然后呢，同时也让别人过上这样子的幸福。那么我们首先要做什么呢？要懂得爱别人，也就是说要慈悲其他的人，或者是爱自己，在这个基础上爱别人，或者是用佛教的话来讲首先要慈悲自己，然后要慈悲别人。
In order to achieve this, that is, in order for ourselves to lead lives that are meaningful, and in order for us to assist others in leading lives that are meaningful, the first thing that we need to do is to first have, in Buddhist terms, have compassion for ourselves, and then upon this foundation, have compassion for others.
慈悲心或者是爱它的价值是全世界人类公认的，没有人说这个没有意义，大家都认为慈悲心或者是爱是非常有价值，这个是我们所有人的公认的。
The value of compassion, the value of love is widely recognized in the world. There is virtually no one who would say that these qualities are not of value. Everyone, more or less, regards these qualities as valuable.
但是问题就是我们现在有没有这样子的这个慈悲心或者爱这个就不好说。我们很多人知道这个是很好的但是呢，那我们自己有没有呢？那就很多人就觉得这个我知道这个很好但是呢，我目前还没有这样子的慈悲心 可能很多人都是这样子。
Even though many people recognize the importance and value of love and compassion, this doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has love and compassion in their minds. So many people understand or know about its value, but at the present point in time, have not yet generated compassion and love in their own minds.
接下来就是我想简单的介绍一下我们怎么样培养这个慈悲心。
So what I'd like to introduce simply now is how we can actually go about cultivating compassion.
全世界的价值观当中这个整个人类的价值观当中爱和慈悲心都是有一定的地位。
So in the whole world, in the whole world, the value of love and compassion, these values have enjoyed quite some status everywhere.
那么佛教的不一样的地方是什么呢？佛教就是有一整套的除了这个价值观以外，还有一种方法。
The difference of Buddhism is that in addition to this value system, it also has a very complete set of methods for cultivating these qualities.
这个方法可以让我们从没有慈悲心到有慈悲心，然后呢，从有慈悲心到发展慈悲心完全就是有一个整套的方法，我们可以这个培养。
These methods are ones that we can use in order to transform ourselves from people with no compassion to begin with to people with considerable compassion, and then from this point to continue to develop our compassion.
然后我们要知道，比如说我们的身体如果不锻炼就会生病就会变得不健康。
So it's just the same as with our physical bodies. If we don't exercise them, then they will become ill and unhealthy.
这个大家都知道，所以现代人都很重视这个身体的锻炼。
Because everyone understands this to be the case, therefore everyone pays a great deal of attention to physical exercise these days.
我们必须知道，我们的精神我们的意识，如果不训练、不锻炼的话，它同样也会生病。
But what we do need to understand is that in just the same way, our minds, if we do not exercise them properly, will also become unwell.
这两个完全是一样的道理。
In fact, both our physical selves and our spiritual or psychological selves follow exactly the same principle.
然后我们的身体可以锻炼，比如说一个非常优秀的这个运动员或者是舞蹈演员那么他首先是从什么也不会到最后就是变得非常优秀，这个整个的这个过程是一步一步这个训练锻炼出来的。
It's just as with our physical bodies, it's possible for an outstanding athlete or an outstanding dancer to begin from a point where they really can't do anything at all and to transform themselves to a level where they are truly excellent or outstanding in their performance. And this is a training that they undergo step by step.
同样的我们的精神我们的意识也是完全可以被训练。
In exactly the same way, our minds or our consciousnesses can also be trained.
我们讲一个故事这个故事呢发生在这个释迦牟尼佛的年代。
There's a story that took place during the time of the Buddha.
有一次呢在这个当时的印度有一个国王，那么国王呢他找到了一个非常非常漂亮的这个大象因为当时呢这个大象是上层社会上层人的交通工具。
This story that took place in this story, which took place in ancient India, there was a king who got for himself a very beautiful elephant. Back in these days, elephants were the transport method of elite members of society.
然后国王把这个大象交给一个驯象师把这个大象驯服。
And the king gave the elephant to a tamer in order that the elephant could be tamed and trained.
然后这个驯象师是一个驯象的高手。
And this elephant tamer was an expert elephant tamer.
他把任何一个大象非常野蛮的这样子的大象都驯服得非常非常好。
He was able to tame even the most wild of elephants.
然后他把这个大象驯服好了以后，然后呢就交给了国王。
And so he tamed the elephant, he trained the elephant, and then he gave him back to the king.
然后国王他说我要试一试你到底把这个大象驯好了没有？
And so the king said, well, I want to test whether or not you tamed the elephant well or not.
然后国王就坐在这个大象的背然后呢这个驯象师就坐在这个大象的头上，然后呢国王和这个驯象师一起骑着这个大象走了一段路。
In order to do this, the king sat on the mounted the back of the elephant, and the elephant tamer sat on the elephant's head, and then together they rode the elephant a little bit down the road.
然后一开始的时候呢，大象是非常非常听这个驯象师的指挥，非常的听话。
In the very beginning, the elephant was very obedient. He was very obedient to the tamer's instructions.
然后走了一截路以后呢，突然间这个大象就是像发疯一样疯狂地跑。
However, after walking a little bit down the road, suddenly the elephant almost seemed as if it went crazy.
然后疯狂地跑，翻了一山又一山。
And began to run crazily, turning over and over.
然后国王就是命令这个驯象师一定要让大象停下来，否则的话我要你的命我要把你头砍掉。
And the king said to the elephant tamer that he had to stop the elephant from running at once, otherwise he would behead him.
但是驯象师采取了所有的这个措施但都没有用，都是失效的。
However, no matter what the elephant tamer did, whatever means he tried to use, none of them worked.
然后驯象师就看到这个国王就面临了生命的危险，这样子的时候，他们就经过一个森林的时候呢，驯象师就告诉这个国王一定要抓住树枝。
Seeing that his life was in danger, when they were about to enter into a forest, the elephant tamer told the king that he should grab the branches above him.
然后国王和这个驯象师最后就是实在是没有办法的情况下，两个人就抓住树枝然后就大象就自己自由了。然后呢，国王和这个驯象师最后就是没有受伤。
So finally, because both of them couldn't do anything else, they grabbed the trees above them, and the elephant ran out from underneath them freely throughout the forest. And by doing this, no one, fortunately, suffered any injury.
虽然两个人都没有受伤但是驯象师就面临了很严重的问题了国王就是说你这是故意的你根本就没有把大象驯好但是呢你这是故意伤害我，我一定要把你杀了。
Even though both of them didn't sustain injuries, the elephant tamer was in a really serious difficulty. The king accused him of doing what he did on purpose. He accused him of not properly training the elephant in order to injure him.
然后驯象师反复的这个解释驯象师就是说这大象 2天以后他一定会回来的啊。但是啊，我可以现场啊给你演示啊，我把这个大象驯服到什么样的程度啊？就是求这个国王给我2天的时间啊，2天以后我证明给你看。
And so the king said that he would kill the elephant tamer, but the elephant tamer begged to be given 2 days latitude. He over and over he explained to the king that in 2 days' time the elephant would return, and then at this time he would be able to prove to the king, in fact, the very high level to which he had in fact trained the elephant.
然后最后啊，国王也就接受了。国王说：“如果2天啊以后不是你说的这样子啊，那么一定要我要把你头砍掉。”
Finally, the king accepted this. He said, okay, well, if in 2 days' time when the elephant comes back, he's not tamed in the way that you claim him to be tamed, then I will have to chop off your head.
然后2天以后啊，这个大象果然就回来了，自己回来了。
As it would happen, 2 days later, the elephant did return, just as the tamer had predicted.
然后国王就说：“好，那你现在怎么样啊？这个演示给我看啊！”驯象师说：“我有办法啊，把一个铁球啊，一个很大的一个铁球，就这个火里面啊，把它变成啊一团火球啊，变成一团火球烧通红的，然后呢就放在现场啊，让这个驯象师命令这个大象啊。”用它的鼻子去抓这个铁球。
So then, when the elephant came back after 2 days, in order to test the level to which the elephant had been tamed, the king required that some metal be placed in a fire until it was hot and molten, and then he demanded that the elephant grab this hot molten metal with his trunk.
好，最后就是国王啊，他同意这种方法，然后呢，当场演示给他看。
So this idea, this test was proposed by the elephant tamer, and then the king accepted it. He said, "Okay, then do that then."
这样子以后呢，就是当着很多人的面啊，国王也在，驯象师也在，还有很多其他的人，就是在
On this occasion, there were lots of people. There was the king, there was the elephant tamer, and there was also a very big audience.
然后这个驯象师就是命令大象用它的鼻子去抓住这个火球。
And the elephant tamer compelled the elephant to grab the molten metal with his trunk.
然后大象就是毫无犹豫的准备用它的鼻子去抓住这个铁球火球。
And the elephant, without any hesitation whatsoever, prepared to use its trunk to grab the hot metal.
然后这个时候驯象师就是这个给国王讲要不要让他抓？如果抓，他一定会抓住的但是他一定会当场就会死掉的那么这么一个珍贵的稀有的这个大象就没了就让国王自己决定然后呢最后就毫无犹豫的要去抓的时候呢，那国王就说那就不要让他抓。
So just as the elephant was preparing to grab this molten metal ball with its trunk, the tamer said to the king, well, look, you make the decision. If the elephant actually, the elephant absolutely will grab the metal with its trunk. However, if it does this, it will die. So you make the choice. Such a rare and precious elephant, if it grabs this metal, then it will die. It will no longer be here. So the king finally answered, okay, then don't worry about it. He doesn't have to grab it.
然后国王他确实也看到了，如果让他去抓，他就这个大象毫无犹豫的去抓，他也相信了，国王也相信了。
And because the king had seen that the elephant had gone to grab the metal without any kind of hesitation, he believed that in actual fact he would have done this.
然后就看到了这个情况以后呢，国王他就特别的想不明白特别的矛盾他今天这么听话那一天为什么那样子的失控他就问这个熏香师，这到底是什么回事？
So the king himself felt very confused. Why was it that on this day the elephant was so obedient, and yet 2 days prior the elephant had lost control? So he asked the elephant tamer what was going on.
熏香师就告诉国王那一天他失控的原因就是附近有一头母象母象在发情母象发情的时候就是有一种特殊的味道大象就闻到了这个味道所以呢他就不听我的这个智慧那么现在他就恢复正常了他就会听我的这个智慧
And the elephant tamer answered that the reason the elephant had lost control 2 days before was because in the vicinity was a female elephant, and that female elephant was in a mating period, and during this time female elephants emit a particular kind of scent which is very attractive to male elephants, and so it was for this reason that the elephant had not listened to the instructions of the elephant tamer. But the elephant tamer said, now the elephant has returned to normal and he is obedient to my instructions once again.
然后最后这个熏香师就告诉国王我只能驯服大象的身体但我不能驯服它的心
And what the tamer finally said to the king is, I can tame the animals, the elephant's physical body, yet I am not able to tame its mind.
然后国王就问那这个天下有没有人可以驯服人的心有没有这样子的人
And so the king asked the tamer, in this world, is there anyone that is able to control a person's mind?
国王就说那是谁
The king asked, who is it?
熏香师说这个叫做释迦牟尼佛他然后呢释迦牟尼佛才能够解决这样子的问题我是可以把他的身体可以驯服得非常好但是他的心理的问题我没有办法解决佛陀才可以把他的心可以训练成就跟他身体一样
And the elephant tamer answered, this person who is able to tame the mind is none other than the Shakyamuni Buddha. I may be able to tame the physical body of an elephant, and yet I am not able to tame its mind. The Buddha is the only one who is able to tame the mind to the same degree as I can tame the physical body.
然后国王就非常的好奇那他说那我一定要去看一下这个人长什么样子 然后熏香师跟这个人国王两个去见释迦牟尼佛
The king, hearing this, felt very curious. He said, okay, well, I'd like to go and see what this Shakyamuni Buddha looks like. And so the elephant tamer and the king went to see the Buddha.
这是一个故事这个故事就是说我们的人的心是可以被训练的可以锻炼可以训练的
So this is a story that we use to illustrate the point that the human mind is able to be trained, it's able to be tamed.
所以我们现在没有慈悲心这个就是不代表我们永远都没有慈悲心
So the fact that we have no compassion or little compassion presently doesn't mean that we will always be in this state of not having compassion.
然后佛教他讲的所有的东西都是一个人的心怎么样去训练的这个过程
And in fact, the entire contents of the Buddhist teachings are relate to the process of taming or training the human mind.
所以佛教讲的这些都是一个人的经验，他在讲一个人的经验。
And so therefore what the Buddhist teachings or what Buddhism is teaching all relate to human experience.
他讲的不是鬼和神他就是讲的是人的经验。
Buddhism isn't about, doesn't teach about ghosts and spirits, rather it talks about a human experience.
所以我们这个时代就是需要我们的这个精神和肉体两个方面的发展要得到平衡。
So it's important in this age that we ensure that both aspects of ourselves, our minds and our physical bodies, develop in a way that is in balance with each other.
那么平衡的这个触发点就是利他性也叫做慈悲心。
And the departure point, or the place that we start, the beginning for setting these two in balance, is cultivating an altruistic mind or a compassionate mind.
好，我们现在简单的介绍一下我们怎么样爱自己的方法。
So what I'd like to introduce now briefly is a method that we can use to cultivate love or compassion for ourselves.
大多数的人他们会谈论爱不爱别人对别人有没有慈悲心大多数的话题就是这个，不太会讲爱不爱自己这样子但是呢，我们现在这个社会里面有一大群的人就是不爱自己然后呢，因此也就很苦恼有这么一群人。
Most people tend to discuss loving or having compassion for others. Relatively few people talk about loving or having compassion for oneself. Nevertheless, in our contemporary society, there is a significant number of people who don't love themselves or feel compassion for themselves, and therefore feel really quite miserable.
然后佛教就是很早以前就是知道这个人的这个心理问题所以就是有这个解决的方法。
Because Buddhism from a very long time ago had insights into the human mind, therefore it developed methods for resolving problems of the mind.
很多人觉得自己就是比如说我们自己就是我想去做点事情然后呢下定决心我要去做一件事情最后呢有没有做到就是当我们遇到这样子的时候呢，然后我们会瞧不起自己然后就讨厌自己明明这个是不可以做的但是呢，因为我们很多时候呢也就虽然从这个伦理道德这个上面呢知道这个是不可以做的但是呢因为我们做不到然后呢这两个问题发生了冲突的时候呢然后我们很多时候就讨厌自己。
So there are many people who know that they should do something or that they need to do something, but because then they are not able to do so, really come to loathe themselves and look down on themselves due to the fact that they have not been able to achieve or do something that they know they should do or something that they feel they necessarily should do.
我们佛教里面有一句话是比较有意义的。
In Buddhism, we've got a saying that relates to this.
就是说人死了以后当我们的意识这个离开了这个身体的时候，我们的意识会看得到我们的身体。
So when a human dies and the consciousness leaves the body, at this point the consciousness is actually able to, from outside, look at the body to see it.
然后这个就是近代的这个最近的这个西方的医学上临床上就是发现了很多很多这样子的这个事情也有很多这些医生这些博士他们写的很多的书关于这方面的，也有些人专门去研究也有这方面的这个书。
And this kind of out-of-body experience is something that there has been quite a bit of recent clinical medical research into. There are books that document this kind of experience.
这是一个事实。
This kind of experience, this phenomenon is true. It's a fact.
然后就是佛教就是说，比如说我们用我们的这个身体当我们活着的时候就是做了很多好事这样子的话，我们到时候我们的意识出去了以后，他看到这个肉体的时候，他就对这个肉体就是有一种感恩的心因为我通过了这个身体完成了很多很多的非常好的事情，所以这个身体对我是有这个恩德，所以这个时候就是有一种感恩的心，这个肉体对这个肉体有一种感恩的心这个是佛教里有记载的。
So in Buddhism, it is said, and it is said in the scriptures, that if we have undertaken a great many positive actions, virtuous deeds, using this very body of ours, then at the time of our death, when our consciousness leaves our body and then observes that body outside the body, it will give rise to a strong feeling of gratitude for the reason that it will appreciate that by means of this body, relying on this body, it was able to do many good things. And so therefore the consciousness at this point will give rise to a feeling of gratitude towards the physical body.
这样子我们不喜欢自己的，不爱自己的，或者是有自卑症的人可以用两种方法。
So we can say in general that people who don't like themselves or have feelings of inferiority can use two methods to deal with this.
我想也许我们有些人用得上有些年轻人可能也许用得上。
It's possible that some of you will be able to make use of these methods. Perhaps maybe some young people won't be able to.
平时不爱自己的人的这个心理的状态是什么样子呢？比如说我自己做错了一件事情哪怕是一小事情然后呢不断的去思考，不断的把它放大最后呢就是在自己心里就觉得这是一个非常严重的问题，然后呢就是瞧不起自己我怎么可以去做一件这样子的事情呢？我怎么可以这样呢？然后就是心里特别多的这个想法，最后就导致了如果这个时候就这种问题当时如果解决不了的话，那就是最后就是变成了一种心理疾病。
It's typically the case that people who don't love themselves or who loathe themselves have a particular kind of thinking. That is, they do something wrong, there's some small mistaken thing that they've done, and then they think about it over and over, and in this way blow it up out of proportion. They amplify this mistake such that it takes on really serious proportions, and then they begin to hate themselves, really look down on themselves, asking themselves constantly, how could I have done this? How could I have done that? And this pattern of thinking ultimately leads to psychological illness.
好，这个时候 第一个方法呢，我们首先静下心来，去分析、思考我们的这个有些成功的地方每一个人不可能一辈子没有成功任何事情，这个不可能的。首先去哪怕是很小很小的，也可以首先去思考一下自己的一些好的部分优点成功的部分。
So the first approach that we can take to a situation like this is to calm ourselves down and then with a calm mind analyze or contemplate those things that we have done that have been successful. It's not possible that any person has never done anything that is positive or successful. So even if it's very small, we need to bring this to mind.
比如说我就考上了一个这么好的一个学校那么这个全世界很多很多的学生的梦想就是要考一个这样子的这个学校但是很多人是没有这个机会，我至少也就考上了这个学校，这已经是一个很大的成就可以这么去思考。
So, for example, one could think to oneself, well, at least I've gained entry to this school. This school is gaining entry to this school is a dream for many people in the world. At the very least, I have gained entry to this school, and this in itself is an achievement.
虽然我有一些不足的地方但是呢，任何一个人不可能有一个完美的这样子的人。
And one should think to oneself that even though I may have some inadequacies, there is no one single person who is perfect.
比如说我决定要做的事情，这一次我没有做好但是也没有那么严重，我还有机会我可以再努力。
And one can think to oneself that even though one might not have done something or achieved something this time, nevertheless, in the future there will be more opportunities to do things well and achieve things.
所以我们刚才讲的，比如说我考上了这个学校，也就是通过我自己的这个努力如果我之前没有那么努力的学习，那我有可能有这个机会吗？我把我自己送到这个学校里面这个当然有很多很多其他人的付出但是也有很大一部分是自己的这个功劳。如果我没有这些我有这今天吗？那么我今天有这个，我的今天也是我自己创造的，所以我也没有那么的差就是这种的思维的模式就去思考自己的很多很多的这些小的这些优点挖掘出来，把这些优点挖掘出来。
Thinking about one's achievements in this way, one can acknowledge that it is due to diligence that one has gained entry to this school, even though, of course, the efforts and assistance of others played a role. In a very significant sense, it was ourselves who created the conditions for this. So thinking in this way, one can look upon oneself as, in fact, not being as lacking as one originally thought. And so it's important then to cultivate this kind of pattern of positive thinking, locating one's advantages or good points and really bringing these forth.
通过我自己的努力努力的学习，让我走进一个这样子的校园这个我对我自己还是非常有恩德的，就是以这样子的方式去思考。比如说我们每一个人都有，除了这个以外，还一定会有很多其他平时我们不太关注的自己的优点，也要去多去思考这些优点。
By thinking or reflecting that it is through one's own effort and one's own studies that one has been able to enter a campus such as this, then one can give rise to gratitude to oneself. And by cultivating this habit of thinking, come to realize or acknowledge many positive aspects of oneself that one doesn't usually pay attention to.
这是一个思维的方式。
So this is an approach a thinking approach that we can adopt.
那么自卑症它本身就是一个自己的一个想法这个观念的问题。那么这个观念的问题呢，我们通过另外的一种观念就把这个问题解决。
So an inferiority complex is ultimately a problem with our thought habits. And so in addressing this complex, we use a different approach, or we try to cultivate a new kind of thought habit in order to resolve it.
我们刚才讲我们不训练的话比如说平时做一些好事这样子的话，到时候我们对我们的这个身体自然就有感恩的心。那么这样子的话，我们现在去训练的话，更加会容易产生这个感恩的心自己对自己的这种感恩的心。
So as we just mentioned before, even we mentioned before the gratitude that one gives rise to towards one's physical body in doing good deeds. If we train ourselves even more in this regard, then our feelings of gratitude will be even stronger.
那么这个可能是1个小时、2个小时，可能不会有很明显的效果。
It's probably the case, though, that just training oneself for 1 or 2 hours in this won't result in particularly manifest results.
我们坚持每天有20分钟或者是稍微更长一点的时间去思考这个问题。
However, if we can persevere in this practice of contemplating these kinds of thoughts,
最后逐步通过这种训练，最后就是得到自信爱自己的同时感恩，对自己有感恩的同时呢，也会有自信。
Gradually or finally, we will find ourselves in a situation where we, in addition to feeling gratitude for ourselves, also have confidence or self-confidence.
然后呢，这是第一个方法。第二个方法呢，我们平时去做一些力所能及的自己的范围内一定会能成功的一些这样子的好事也就是利他的事情。
So that's the first method we can use for addressing feelings of inadequacy or self-loathing. The second method is doing our best or acting within the limits of our capacity to do things that are good for others. And so we can start off at a small level with actions that we will easily be able to be successful with.
然后我们发现自己有能力去这个就完成这样子的事情的时候呢，然后开始对自己有自信。
And what we'll discover is that when we actually find ourselves with the ability to accomplish these actions, our confidence in ourselves will also improve.
然后就是一些这样子的事情我们去做一些这种比较小的自己能够完成的事情，然后他通过这个事情给我们带来的这种这个回报这样子的时候呢，然后就去思考就是因为这是我自己去创造的这个条件，然后因为这个条件现在给我带来了一些这样子的这个优点然后这么去思考，这是一个实际行动的方法来证明自己，然后呢从中就得到自信，然后有了自信，然后开始就是爱自己。
So by starting with small positive actions and accomplishing results with them, then the feeling we will gain from this is one of accomplishment and confidence. We will feel that we created the conditions for these things to happen, and so this is an approach of undertaking concrete actions that enables us to prove our own ability, from which we gain confidence and then ultimately a feeling of love or compassion for oneself.
好，有了这样子的自信以后呢，然后我们在这个基础上去慈悲其他的人，也就是爱别人。
And then once we've established this foundation in self-confidence, then we can go on to generating compassion for others.
这个时代就是我们很多人就是掌握了各种各样的这个技术如果这些技术这些能力如果用到不该用的地方那就一定会伤害很多很多的人。如果把这些能力用到该用的地方，那么我们很多人是非常有机会做非常非常伟大的利他的这个事情。
In this present age of ours, there is a lot of technology at our disposal. If used incorrectly, this technology has the capacity to be of great harm to other beings. However, if it is used in a positive manner, then the same technology actually carries the opportunity for many people to do actions of great altruism.
好，然后这个利他的这个方法就是培养慈悲心的方法呢，在这个大乘佛教当中很多。
So these methods of benefiting others and cultivating compassion, the Mahayana tradition, the Mahayana teachings contain many methods.
现在我们的日常生活当中，我们大多数的人平时最关注的是我们自己的快乐和幸福。
For the majority of people in our everyday lives, our main concern is our own happiness.
在这种情况下，我们得到的幸福和快乐确实是不是很多。
However, in this situation, actually, the happiness that we actually achieve or attain is rather minimal.
现在我们可以试一试换一种思维的方法看看怎么样。
So what we should do is try a different way of thinking and see what the results are.
就是爱别人，慈悲其他人。
So what we should try is instead what the results of loving other people and having compassion for other people are.
是我们在这个生活当中我们可以一个人可以感受到的这种幸福和快乐。我们的现在的这个思维就是确实很多的这个幸福就是阻挡在外面我们没有感觉到这种幸福。
So as we presently are in our present state, there's a great deal of happiness, in fact, that we could enjoy or we could attain, but in our present state are not able to do so.
这种大乘佛教讲的这种物资式的这种爱虽然我们是在这个慈悲别人为别人着想，但是真正的受益者还不是别人，是自己。
So even in Buddhism, when we speak of selfless compassion, we are caring and exercising compassion for others. Actually, the greatest beneficiary from this selfless compassion is oneself.
慈悲心我们知道慈悲心很好但是呢，慈悲心的背后的它给我们带来的一些真正的这种感受是什么样子，这个我们可能很多人还不知道。
So even though we all know that compassion is very good, it is possible that many people don't know or haven't experienced the feelings, very positive feelings that underpin compassion for themselves.
当我们是一个只懂得考虑自己，只懂得为自己着想这样子的时候呢，我们每一个人的精神是极度的空虚极度的浮躁，是一个这样子的状态。
When we are still in a state of only caring for ourselves and concerning ourselves for ourselves, then actually our minds are in an extremely empty and restless state.
然后呢，我们通过外面的物质来刺激我们的感官，从中获得的 这种感受，我们把它当作一种快乐和幸福然后呢，我们把所有的幸福和这个快乐就是锁定在一个这样子的范围那这个时候，这个快乐和幸福其实是一个非常非常有局限性的快乐。
So what we do is rely on matter, experiences, phenomena in the external world to stimulate our senses, and the feeling that comes from this we regard as happiness and joy. But even if this is happiness and joy, it is only very limited in scope. That is to say, the happiness that it is able to bring us is one that is very limited.
然后我们的慈悲的这个范围越大然后我们的幸福的范围也就这么大。
In actual fact, the scope of our happiness hinges on the scope of our compassion. The greater our compassion, the greater our happiness.
如果真的有一个这样子的无自私的就像大乘佛教讲的这种这个慈悲，就是无自私的这种慈悲，拥有了这样子的慈悲，哪怕是一点点的这个慈悲进入了我们的这个精神的时候，那么我们的精神呢，整个精神整个的这个感受都会有巨大的变化。
If the kind of selfless compassion that the Mahayana Buddhist teachings talk about were able to be cultivated in our minds, even if a really small drop of this compassion was able to enter our minds, then the feeling, our experience would give rise to immense change.
然后我们今天讲的就是一个把佛教当中的很多的理论就很多的佛教的宗教的这个部分就抛开了以后呢，然后在这个当中就取出一个大家有信仰没有信仰的人都可以用的一个这样子的方法来告诉大家怎么样培养这个慈悲心。
So what I've done in my talk tonight is to strip away all of the religious content to share with everybody a method that everyone can use, regardless of whether they are religious or not, in order to cultivate compassion.
然后佛教的这些理念呢，全部抛开了以后呢，我们剩下的这个就是一个很小的这个范围了。这个范围，在这个范围当中要建立一个这个慈悲心的话有一点点难但是呢也是可以的，也可以培养慈悲心。
Of course, if we strip away everything else about Buddhism and only leave this method, then to really truly cultivate compassion is a little difficult, but still it is still possible to cultivate some compassion.
那这个简单的说有两个步骤。
So in order to do this, there are essentially two steps.
首先第一个步骤就是我们看到任何一个人就是包括这个陌生人当我们看到这样子的人的时候呢就是在我们的这个心目当中把每一个人都是变得非常的可爱就比如说我们碰到了看见了我们的父母看见了我们的很好的朋友这样子的一种感情首先要创建一个陌生人之间或者是所有人之间要建立一个这样子的这个感情。
So the first step is giving rise to a feeling of affection to any person we meet, regardless of whether it is somebody we know, someone with whom we're familiar, or whether the person is a complete stranger. So the first thing is establishing this feeling of affection.
这个不是很容易但是如果我们稍微愿意花一点点时间精力这样子的话还是可以的。
even though this isn't particularly easy, so long as we're willing to invest a little bit of time in cultivating this, it is possible to do.
因为我们的人的意识它就像一个，比如说，就像一个普通的金属，比如说一块铁这样子。那么，比如说一个普通的铁就跟一个磁铁放在一起的时候时间稍微久一点的时候呢，然后这个铁它也就会产生像一个这个磁的这个能力它本来是没有这个磁场，但是呢，它可以产生一点这个磁，它也可以吸收其他的铁。
So we can liken our human mind or our consciousness to a piece of metal, just an ordinary piece of metal. When a piece of metal is put together with a magnet and they are stuck together for a length of time, then eventually the piece of metal comes to take on some kind of magnetic force itself. So even though it didn't have any to begin with, by virtue of being stuck together with the magnet for a period of time, it becomes a little bit magnetic itself.
除了一些修心人以外我们几乎一辈子都不会去训练我们这个心我们只是训练一下锻炼一下我们的肉体。
With the exception of people who are actual Buddhist practitioners, most people throughout their entire lifetime will never go about training their minds. They might train their physical bodies, but don't turn to training their minds.
如果真的去用心的去这个训练的话，比我们的肉体的训练来得更容易一些。
But in actual fact, if we are to train our minds with effort, then in actual fact, training our minds is easier than training our physical bodies.
首先，第一个思维的方式呢，我们看到任何人的时候每一个人都是跟我是一样什么方面的一样呢？比如说我不愿意面对任何的这个痛苦，不愿意接受任何的痛苦那么跟我一样，所有的人也是一样，他们也不愿意面对任何的痛苦。然后我希望拥有各种各样的这个幸福快乐那么其他的人包括动物也都是这样，这是我们人类的一个共同的愿望这个方面呢没有任何的区别，所以佛教从这个角度讲众生平等这个我们大家都是一样。
So in order to cultivate this affection for all beings, the first thing that we need to do is habituate our thinking to viewing all beings as equal. And what do we mean by this, the equality or equalness of all beings? Well, the first way that we need to think is that all persons, including animals, all beings, just like ourselves, do not wish to encounter any suffering. At the same time, just like ourselves, they also wish to enjoy happiness. So by really coming to recognize that every being is the same in this regard, that this in fact is a common wish, or these are common wishes or aspirations of all humans, and that there is no difference between any of us, we can give rise to this view of equality.
那么平时呢，我们看到一个陌生人的时候，我们跟他之间好像有一个很远的距离一样。
Normally, when we come across a stranger, we feel as if there's a big distance between ourselves.
现在我去了解他去理解他他们也就是跟我一样这样子的时候呢，然后呢，这个距离就是逐渐这个距离就不存在。
However, if we deliberately go about if we deliberately seek to appreciate the sameness, the equality between the two of us, then this feeling of distance will disappear or reduce.
然后这个我们训练的比较到位的时候呢，我们看到任何一个人的时候呢，就是第一个反应大家都跟我一样这种感觉。
And when we've trained ourselves in this to a relatively firm level, then when we come across anyone, we will look upon them as the same as ourselves or equal to ourselves.
那这样子以后呢，第一个就对大家产生了一种同情心。
So what this firstly does is cultivate within us a feeling of empathy.
既然大家都是像我一样希望幸福，不愿意面对痛苦这样子的时候呢，然后知道了这个情况以后，然后我们就会愿意更多的去关注别人的感受。
In realizing or coming to appreciate that everyone is the same as ourselves insofar as they wish to enjoy happiness and seek to avoid suffering, then we will come to be more considerate and concerned with the feelings and experience of others.
好，然后就是第二个步骤。
And now we come to the second step of this approach.
第二个步骤呢，就是通过这种方法自己和他人之间就稍微就是平等了一下这样子以后呢，平衡以后呢，然后再去想那么既然大家都是这样子大家都不愿意痛苦，大家都希望自己幸福快乐，那这样子的话，我没有理由就是全世界70多亿人口当中只关心我一个人其他人的这些感受根本就不在乎这个是没有理由的所以我要就是让或者是希望所有人因为大家都是一样，所以我要关注所有人的这个感受就是要这样子训练，用这个思维的方式去训练，要求自己。
So once we've been able to establish through training ourselves a view of ourselves and others as equal, then insofar as they wish to avoid suffering and enjoy happiness, then on this basis we should think that then, or come to realize that there is no justification whatsoever for us not caring about in other people. So we can train ourselves to appreciate that there is no reason, there's no justification for us failing to have concern for other people on the planet.
这样子训练了以后呢，最后我们就是可以达到一个什么样的程度呢？这个要看我们每一个人的自己的这个训练的程度比如说稍微比较高一点的程度，就是跟自己一样希望所有的人都远离没有痛苦，希望所有的人拥有幸福快乐发自内心的就是会产生这样子的念头那么这个就叫做慈悲心，这个是我们的训练就是基本上就成功了。
As to what level of training or compassion we are able to reach, this really depends on how we train ourselves, the extent of our training. It is possible for us to train ourselves to an extent where we sincerely wish from the bottom of our hearts for all people to enjoy happiness and for all people to be free from suffering. And when we cultivate or grow our compassion to such a level, or concern for other people to such a level, then this is the cultivation of compassion, and we can at this point regard our training to have been successful.
然后佛教里面还有一种是人与这个大自然之间的建立这种感情的方法，也就是说我们对大自然的这个慈悲心。
There's also an approach or a method in Buddhism that we can use to enable humans to cultivate compassion towards the natural environment.
然后，如果我们每一个人真的拥有这样子的这个慈悲心这样子的话，那我们21世纪全世界面临的很多的问题，完全是每一个人的内心当中就可以解决了。
And if in the 21st century that everyone employed these methods of cultivating compassion, then it would be possible for us to solve all the problems that we currently face.
全世界的战争能源分配的不均匀等等等等，这些都是它的源头，就是因为我们没有这样子为他着想的这样子的精神。所以就是产生在这样子的情况下产生的。
All of the problems, whether they be wars or issues, unfairness in relation to the distribution of resources, the origin of all of these problems is due to a lack of altruistic attitude among humans, and that's what causes these issues to come about in the first place.
然后对动物的虐待，还有这个杀害等等，这些全部就是如果有了这个慈悲心那么我们每一个人的内心当中解决了这个根等于就是解决了这些所有的这些问题的源头。
Problems such as the abuse of animals and the killing of animals too, problems like this, compassion, if we are able to cultivate it within ourselves, is able to address all of these problems at the root. And insofar as it does address problems at the root, therefore it addresses their manifestations.
然后未来的世界就是往什么方向发展就是跟这些全世界一流的这些大学的教育有关系。
As for the future direction of the world, a lot of this hinges on the direction of university education.
所以我们就是越是有影响力的这样子的这个学校的学生的内心当中拥有一点这样子的这个爱或者是慈悲心，那这样子的话，那么就是未来的世界一定是有非常大的帮助。
For this reason, the more that students at influential universities in the world have compassion and some love in their minds, the more assistance this will be to our future world.
这种慈悲心这种爱，我们可以说跟任何宗教没有关系也可以说跟所有的宗教有关系。
We can say that this compassion and love that we are speaking about, we can say that it has nothing to do with any religion. At the same time, we can say that it has something to do with every religion.
意思就是说，它已经超越了所有宗教的这个局限性。
So what I mean by this is that love and compassion, they transcend the limits or the scope of every religious tradition.
如果我们每一个人的这个内心当中真的是有一天有一点点这样子的慈悲心，那么我们的人生一定会有一个很大的变化。
If everyone in their minds were able to cultivate this compassion, then our lives would give rise to very great changes.
从此以后就是比如说我们每一个人的心里有一个这样子的慈悲心，从此以后呢，我们一定会感受到一种前所未有的幸福感。那么这种幸福感跟我们之前用物质来刺激我们的感官从中获得的这个幸福快乐是完全是不是一个档次。
And from this point onwards, the happiness, the unprecedented happiness that we are able to experience in our minds compared to the happiness that we previously experienced through the stimulation of our sensory faculties with external phenomena, these two happinesses are completely on different levels.
比如说一个乡下的小孩，他从来没有吃过巧克力蜂蜜等等等等其他的这些甜的味道只吃过这个甘蔗那么这个小孩他一定会认为所有的甜的东西就是甘蔗如果你不吃甘蔗那么没有甜的东西尝不到甜的味道，它就是这样子的一个天然的一个很天真的一个想法。
This is just the same as a child from a remote country area who had never tasted chocolate or honey before, only having sugarcane to eat. In this situation, such a child would equate sugarcane with sweetness. It would regard sugarcane as the only source of sweetness and nothing else. So this is such an example.
有一天他就吃上了这个巧克力各种各样的甜点这样子的时候他就会发现原来甜的不仅仅是这一点还有很多很多其他的或者是更好的。
If one day such a child were to taste things like chocolates and other sweets, they would immediately realize that there is a diversity of sweetness and that some sweetnesses may be even better than the one they had become used to previously.
同样，我们现在就是不太懂得享受就是有更多的这个幸福和快乐。我们现在大家都非常的执着的放不下的我们认为就是这个通过吃喝玩乐产生的这种幸福或者快乐，我们把它当作幸福和快乐，那么没有去想过别的。有些人甚至也就觉得除了这个以外没有幸福快乐但是呢，其实我们就是可以享受到更好的更伟大的更有意义的这样子的这个幸福。那么这个就是我们拥有了慈悲心以后，然后我们每一个人就能够在自己的生活当中感觉得到感受得到。
And it's the same with many of us who don't understand that there are different kinds of happiness. We are very attached and can't let go to our typical enjoyment of sensory stimulation. We regard this as what happiness is, and we don't understand that, and we think that nothing else is happiness other than this. Whereas actually, in fact, there are other sources of extremely great, meaningful happiness. Compassion is one such source, and this is something that everyone is able to experience for themselves personally.
好，今天我们的就是这个讲座呢，就是一个小规模的一个简单的讲座，这个讲座呢到此结束了。在这个过程当中我们时间也就比较长，2个小时。在这个过程当中，大家非常认真的听了所以就是非常感谢大家。
So this small talk that we have had this evening is now coming to an end. We've talked now for over 2 hours. Everyone has listened very carefully, so thank you very much.